This is the program that sparked this space passion in Jeff Bezos. And of course, now that he's the richest man on the planet, he can make all of his childhood dreams come true. And we get to kind of go along for the virtual ride, if you will.
Good morning to you, Anne-Marie. I'm sorry I can't hear you, but you look excited. and certainly we're excited about what's happening right now, but I don't have any audio right now. But what we're seeing, and according to the timeline, is Jeff Bezos and his crew getting into the car to get ready to head to the spacecraft, because we are just minutes away from liftoff in West Texas, where the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, will soon blast off into space. Really just kind of a remarkable and historic day. I've had the opportunity to speak with Jeff Bezos in the past. This is more than just a supersonic joyride for him. This is something that he has dreamed about since he was 5 years old, when he watched, of course, the Apollo 11 moon landing. Jeff Bezos today becomes an astronaut. After idolizing men who've gone into space. And while he had the fortune and the ability to do it and pay for it and build this spacecraft himself, this is also really in some ways, the fulfillment of a dream for him, a lifelong dream that is more than just a hobby for him. He talked about it in his graduation speech from high school. And so I think this is, and if you put yourself in his shoes today, this is an incredible achievement. We should introduce our guests here. We have Bill Harwood, who is our CBS News space consultant and has covered space flight for 35 years. Am I right, Bill?
You're right. I hate to say it, but yes, you're right.
And of course, we are especially pleased to be joined by Charlie Bolden, the former NASA administrator, astronaut, who's logged some nearly 700 hours in space. And so, Charlie, you're the only one at this table who's been to space.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here, first of all. Thanks very much.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we're thrilled to have you here. So let's just start it off. I mean, Bill, is this risky?
Yes, it is. I think they've done everything they can to make this as safe as possible. But you asked me the other day if I get nervous when I watch something like this, and the answer is yes. Because anytime you put somebody on top of a rocket, that is not a normal daily activity. That is high risk by nature. There's a lot of energy involved, a lot of high-tech components that all have to work right. And so, yeah, a little bit nervous, but again, I think they've done everything they can to make it as safe as possible.
And Charlie, quickly, do you have any concerns?
I'm worse than Bill. I have butterflies, and I had a hard time sleeping last night. Because you understand the risk. But my concern is just for the safety of the crew, because it's never over until it's over. And but as Bill has said before, they've done all the preparation that's needed to be done. This is their 16th flight, and they've demonstrated the abort capability. They've demonstrated everything that I would be concerned about. So I'm just praying that everything goes well.
44 minutes you can see until launch. There's that countdown clock that's provided as the team is now in this vehicle. It's a 2-mile ride before they get into the capsule. My partner in watching this is Anne-Marie Green in New York. And Anne-Marie, it's great to join you on watching this moment, to be together, to see this happen today.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I have to tell you, Nora, I am one of those people that sort of saw this as something that would happen in the future. It's sort of science fiction. And increasingly, as the days have sort of come closer and closer, and I'm realizing that you've got these sort of 3 billionaires on this space race, and it's coming to fruition that the future is now. I'm actually finding myself sort of having butterflies. And I understand, the concern about safety. And if there's one thing I think about Blue Origin, is that their whole focus has been not only safety, but sort of slow and steady, right? They've got the tortoise emblazoned on the capsule there to sort of symbolize that move of going slow and steady and not making any mistakes. And of course, now they have human cargo, if you will. So they've taken unbelievable steps to ensure that that the 4 people on board take off and land as safely as possible. We want to bring in CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman right now, because, Mark, you've been doing a lot of coverage. And if there's one thing that I've been getting from your coverage as you speak to people who are part of Blue Origin, is that safety has always been the #1 concern for them.
No question. I mean, safety is the number one concern, I think, for anybody that's in the space business. I mean, there are three cliches in space. Space is hard, space is the ultimate team sport, and safety is job one. And as part of that, I think, we had a brief pause in the countdown clock here. It paused for about 4 minutes. I don't know the reason, no obvious weather issue, but the clock is now running again, and so the launch apparently was slide by 4 minutes. But that said, the Blue Origin folks here really believe that they have this. I mean, they had 15 successful test flights. The capsule returned safely to Earth all 15 times. They certainly wouldn't put people on this if they didn't feel it was safe. And you don't put the boss, on the line unless you really think that, like, it's all systems go. So they think they have it. They think this is their moment. They've worked on this for 2 decades, methodically, step by step, which is their company motto and sort of their corporate mindset and discipline. And so the big moment has arrived. It's both a moment for Jeff Bezos and a milestone for him, his company, and for space tourism, commercial space, all of it. There's a lot riding on this flight to be successful.
And when Richard Branson took off with Virgin Galactic, there was this talk of maybe that he would be upstaging Blue Origin a little bit because, he was the first to go of these three sort of billionaires. But now we have the oldest person and the youngest person to venture into space on this vessel, which I think, it's worth talking about. Can we talk a little bit about who's on board with Jeff Bezos?
Sure, you got Jeff Bezos and his brother Mark. He wanted essentially his best friend to experience this moment of a lifetime with him. You have an 82-year-old woman, the oldest person who would ever go to space, named Wally Funk. She was originally in the astronaut pool back in the 60s with NASA. Trained, never got the chance to fly because back then NASA would not let women fly. She has her opportunity to go today. And then there's 18-year-old Oliver Daemen. He's the son of a wealthy Dutch businessman. We're looking at pictures now of the landing zone, and I believe we're starting to see some arrivals here at the landing zone too, Anne-Marie. So they are moving out, and you see them walking now, I think, moving into the landing zone. So it's about 3 miles behind me right now. They're supposed to get into the capsule about 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We'll see if the 4-minute countdown clock delay had an impact on that too. And again, big moment here. It's only going to be 10 or 11 minutes, the ride itself, but it is going to be the sort of the ultimate thrill ride for all 4 people on board.
Yeah, we got a chance just to see the 4 passengers there. And, the thing about Wally Funk, I know we keep talking about her age. She's 82, and apparently she hates the fact that people keep bringing up her age. But it's such an incredible accomplishment. She was part of the Mercury 13, which is sort of a group of women who were tested to see if they could be astronaut worthy. It was not part of a NASA program. It was something separate. And, one of her kind of accomplishments was that she stayed in the isolation tank for like 10 and a half hours. And she sort of proved her worthiness. But back then, when she was 23 in the 60s, it didn't matter. NASA was not interested in sending women to space. And so the whole program, the Mercury 13 thing, sort of got folded, and she never really got to see her dream come true. And now it's going to happen.
And she's also proof that a dream deferred is not necessarily a dream denied. I mean, she's having this opportunity much later than she wanted it, presumably much later than she deserved, but this is how badly she wanted to go to space. She actually bought a ticket on Virgin Galactic for some flight down the road just because she wanted to get into space finally that badly. And now, of course, she's getting her chance because Jeff Bezos has invited her on board. You can see her and the other 3 other crew members now walking up the steps of the launch tower there. They have been training for the last couple of days, which is all Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin believe is necessary for this sort of trip to space. This is a moment of space tourism. This is a chance to go up for 10 or 11 minutes, experience weightlessness, look down, see the Earth, look up, see the blackness of space. So they've been in training for a couple of days, bonding as a crew, and now they are moving up the steps on their way to get into the capsule itself, which should happen in about 8, 9, 10 minutes from now. So this is the moment that Jeff Bezos has dreamed of, since he was 5 years old, as Nora mentioned, but also when he founded Blue Origin back in the year 2000. They've been working on this. Remember, this was a startup space company. When this company started up, there was no such thing as a reusable rocket. Now there is. That itself is very innovative technology, just as it is the case also with SpaceX and Elon Musk. These space barons are reinventing the way humans launch from Earth, and that is significant in itself, and that is why today is not just a moment, but a milestone as these folks make their way up the stairs and into the capsule. Anne-Marie?
That's such a great point, Mark. Thank you so much. Nora, what Mark said sort of really kind of hits the nail on the head. A lot of people are going to have dismissed this as kind of billionaire joy rides. They've been sort of criticized for spending billions of dollars on this. But you've spoken to Jeff Bezos, so you know that for him, it's not just about a joy ride. It's actually not even just about space tourism. He has sort of broader, bigger plans for space that he thinks will have a positive impact on humanity. And we can sort of venture down that road perhaps later on. But, dismissing it as a joyride may be a little too simplistic, Nora.
Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. That's right. And I think if it weren't for the space program, we wouldn't have cell phones because the space program launches satellites into space. And that's, of course, the most simplistic, I think, way to explain it to people. But the journey into space has many historic reasons, of course, and John F. Kennedy and beginning the Apollo program and launched all that. But now it is a civilian program, as we know. And Charlie, we should talk about what exactly these future astronauts to be. Once they enter into space, they will become astronauts. The training is much different than what you had to go to. They essentially had 2 days of training, 14 hours. They had to be able to climb 7 flights of stairs. But that's much different than what you went through.
It's significantly different, but it's for a different reason. We had to be prepared to fly the vehicle. We had to be prepared to work emergencies and the like. And the new Shepard is an autonomous vehicle, much like the Crew Dragon. So that's just the wave of the future, I think, where people, when you talk about tourism, you want to try to take the interaction of the human out of the play as much as you can, so that you can have a tourist.
And this is a 10 to 11 minute flight where how long did you, and this is a suborbital flight, you orbited the Earth for how long at a time?
An orbit's 90 minutes, 45 minutes of darkness, 45 minutes of daylight. We were in the vehicle I was talking with Bill a little bit earlier about the fact that they won't have to lay in the vehicle for 2.5 hours waiting, listening to everybody else do their thing while you just lay there in anticipation of going. And that's good. But to take away, I was surprised that they were walking up the steps. So the most stressful thing they will do today physically is get in the vehicle. I would be a little bit concerned, and maybe somebody will comment later that you ought to get an elevator. I mean, there's enough going on that they shouldn't have to worry about the stress of climbing 7 flights of steps.
I want to describe what we're seeing right now because you can see Jeff Bezos there with his cowboy hat on. His brother, Mark, looks to be sort of adjusting his flight suit. They'll get inside the capsule, and they will have some comms checks, and then we will see that liftoff, which was supposed to be at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. It's been delayed about 4 minutes. But, Bill, you have very kindly brought with you a model here on set, so we get a sense of exactly what the spacecraft looks like.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The booster is a single-stage rocket, right? That's what takes them off the ground. It accelerates up to about 3 times the speed of sound in about 2.5 minutes or so. Shortly thereafter, the capsule separates. It literally just comes off the rocket when it stops firing and continues upward ballistically, kind of like just as you throw a baseball up in the air, right? It'll be slowing down continuously, but it'll be continuing to climb. And as soon as they separate from this booster, they begin to feel weightlessness. That's what happens. It's moving. They're moving at the same speed as the capsule inside. There's no acceleration. They're floating. And it'll continue up to about a little more than 62 miles. And they'll come over the top. They're going to get some fantastic views through these big windows you can see. And then they'll make a descent and parachute back down to the ground. So it's a action-packed 10-minute thrill ride, as Mark said. No question about that.
I was so interested to read, too, that they're saying about a third of that capsule that sits on top is made up of windows. the largest windows
Yeah.
ever. I was looking, it might be 3 times larger than the window perhaps you'd have on a commercial a commercial civilian
right.
aircraft.
That's right.
And so you're really going to get the view.
Going to get the view, and that's a big selling point for Blue Origin. They think their capsule is roomier in the sense they can unstrap and float around during those 3 minutes and get those spectacular views. That's certainly something they're using in their advertising, no question.
Bill will know this, but many of the people like Max Faget and some of the designers of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo spacecraft are rolling over in their graves because the Mercury astronauts really had to fight to get a window into the. They felt that breaking the metal, the shell would weaken the spacecraft. So windows of this size would be absolutely unheard of to the original designers of human spacecraft.
Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of explore a little bit, Nora, the difference between what people would have seen with Virgin Galactic's flight. Obviously, it looks very different. We're talking about a plane versus a rocket. One is autonomous, one had a crew. But Bill, could you kind of talk a little bit more about, other than the obvious differences, some of the other key differences, and also the differences in purpose? What Virgin Galactic is hoping to do eventually versus what Blue Origin is hoping to do eventually?
Well, the bottom line is they're selling the same thing. They're selling about 3 minutes of weightlessness and flights out of the atmosphere. That part is the same. How they get there, however, is very different. Virgin Galactic has chosen a space plane design. It's air-launched, meaning it's carried up to 45,000 feet by another aircraft, and then it's dropped like a bomb, if you will. The rocket engine then ignites and shoots them up to space. The Blue Origin capsule is just that. It's a capsule mounted on top of a rocket. I'm reminded of Alan Shepard in his first Mercury flight. That was a rocket booster and a capsule. This is the same design philosophy. And just like that original Mercury flight, they have an abort system. They have a way to get away from the rocket if there's a malfunction. The Virgin Galactic spaceplane, the rocket is integral to the spaceplane itself. They can shut it down and then glide to a landing if there's a problem, but you don't get away from it in that sense. You can get away from your rocket with Blue Origin. So very different approaches to achieve the same goal, which is give your passengers a few minutes of weightlessness and a view of the planet that only a few hundred people, including Charlie, have ever had.
And Charlie, what's the significance of them ringing the bell that we just saw them do?
That I don't know, but everybody, I was telling Bill earlier, you see a lot of the Russian tradition, if you will, the laxity or the looseness of getting to the vehicle this morning. We're really formal in how we get into the vehicle, get strapped in. When you fly with the Russians, there's a lot of tradition. If Yuri Gagarin did it, then it becomes tradition and everybody's got to do it. Pee on the tire, pardon my French, but those kinds of things. It's a nautical kind of thing that I think Jeff or somebody in Blue Origin introduced.
Oh, and look at Wally Funk just entering that capsule. And I just think about, there's a wonderful piece on her in the New York Times today, a woman who has spent her whole life being a pioneer, injured herself in a ski accident at age 17, broke 2 vertebrae, ended up being a pilot. She's trained thousands of pilots, and of course, one of the last 2 living women who were part of Mercury 13, and at 82 will become the oldest woman, surpassing John Glenn as the oldest person to go into space.
And one of the things that should not be lost on people, she is the most experienced member of this crew. She will experience some things that will maybe be old hat to her. Jeff's probably been in a centrifuge, but centrifuge training is, as I understand, is not a part of the crew training here because, like you said, it's a pretty quick training session because you're going to go for this short ride. She has thousands of hours of flight time. She knows what G feels like. She knows what G is. So she's the most experienced person on this crew. And the other thing I'll point out, because I have lots of women in my life,
I hope so.
It's not human. It's not manned space flight anymore. I know it's a nitpicking point. It's human space flight. And the very first person who flew with Virgin Galactic, who wasn't one of the 2 pilots, was Beth Moses. So women are very prominent in where we're going. They're engineers, they're designers. Charlie Blackwell Thompson will be the first flight director for when we start doing some of the commercialized stuff that's coming up. So women are playing a prominent role, and we should not forget that as the grandfather of 3 granddaughters.
I love that you said that. I love that you said that. And, you know, the one thing I'm thinking about, too, is that as the capsule separates from the rocket, there's going to be about 3 minutes of weightlessness, correct? So that's the opportunity. Will the flight director say, OK, you can unbuckle, and we'll see the floating in space part of that people associate with space?
They actually have each seat has a little instrument panel in front of them, and a light will literally come on when the capsule separates, which translates means you're free to move about the cabin. They have an easy, quick-release seatbelt system, so they're going to release that, and they'll be able to float around. And the top of the capsule, and this is kind of small, but right around the top of the capsule is a circular handrail so that you can reach up and grab this and orient yourself as you look out the window. But they're going to get a chance to literally move about the cabin, as they say in the commercial, and enjoy this for about 3 minutes.
Or if I can add one quick thing. The difference between this and Virgin Galactic is this is a precursor to where Jeff really wants to get. New Glenn is being constructed right now at the Kennedy Space Center, and that is an orbital spacecraft. So this is a test.
Yes.
Just like Mercury and Gemini, this is getting us to New Glenn.
Let's listen in now, because Sarah Knight is going to be leading us through this, and they're also doing a comms check. So let's listen in to hear what it's like. That is Kevin Sprague, who is known as crew member 7, who is helping each of them and their comms check in for this flight that's set to launch in 25 minutes from now. Jump in if you see anything that looks... This is just
marveling at the size of those windows.
That's a big window. You got to be careful what you do.
Nora, I wouldn't mind asking either Bill or Charles just a quick question about the training. We heard that 2 days of training is all it took. I'm sure that's not the case when it came to previous flights, Charles. I'm wondering, you know, when you talked about weightlessness, whether or not there is. It seems like it would be effortless, but I would assume that there is some sort of training to ensure that, you know, you keep it all together when you're flying around in a weightless environment and you can actually enjoy the ride. Do you have any idea what sort of training they did go through, as little as it was?
I'm going to defer to Bill. You know, I would hope that they have been through at least one zero-G flight, but with the addition of the 18-year-old, that may not have been possible. He was added to the crew late enough. And I go back again to saying why Wally, as the most experienced crew member here, Wally has probably accumulated more time in zero-G training than I did in my 14 years in the space program. Because, you know, once you went through the original orientation, you didn't get back in the zero-G airplane very much after that because you were always in a real trainer.
Yeah, and Charlie, we should say for our viewers out there, what the zero-G airplane he's talking about, there are aircraft that fly parabolic flights. They fly big parabolas, and as you go up and over, the passengers inside experience 30 seconds or so of weightlessness at a time. And over the course of a flight, you can get 6 or 7 minutes altogether of weightlessness. And there's no question Wally Funk has done that in the past. I don't know if she did it for this particular training or not.
Actually, the training, I've read about it in our research, it was actually quite light. Like I said, it was just 2 days. It was the ability to walk across uneven surfaces was one of them, to fasten and unfasten his or her own seatbelt in 15 seconds. So they would be, presumably, there are some weight and height requirements as well, but they appear to be ones that most of us could pass.
Bill mentioned the fact that it's a quick release.
It sounds like a DUI test.
Yeah, but you know, the fact that there's a quick release seatbelt, as they go through the debrief from this flight, it would not surprise me if they didn't say, we need to.
Let's get things started with the comm check.
Let's listen.
Astronaut Oliver, how do you read?
Crew control, Astronaut Oliver, loud and clear.
Copy. Astronaut Wally, how do you read me?
Wally, push the button and answer. What? How do you push the button and tell you can you're good? Oh, boy, that's weird.
Copy, Astronaut Wally. Astronaut demo.
Blue Control, this is Astronaut Demo. I have you loud and clear.
Copy. Astronaut Bezos.
Blue Control, Bezos. I read you loud and clear. Thanks for everything, Sarah. We appreciate it.
It's my honor and my pleasure. All right, astronauts, we are at T-minus 21 minutes and counting. As we proceed, I'll keep you updated. For now, just sit back and relax.
And Anne-Marie, I just want to note that and tell everyone that is Sarah Knight. She is the capsule communications between Mission Control and the astronauts. She joined Blue Origin back in 2016. She has taught more than 70,000 people STEM topics. She has a bachelor's degree in physics and astronomy from the University of Hawaii. And so she is also, of course, an incredible scientist that is part of this mission. I want to thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank Bill Harwood. And of course, Charlie, we are going to switch over now to join CBS News and the network, and we'll be back with you after the launch. Anne-Marie, thank you so much.
And actually, we're going to continue here on CBSN. Thank you, Nora, Charles, and Bill. We want to bring in Doug Dunbar. He's our Dallas-Fort Worth. He's from our Dallas-Fort Worth station, and he's actually on the ground right there by the launch site. So I'm really curious to kind of get from you, Doug, just what the mood is like. I can hear the chatter in the background. You know, just give us sort of the lay of the land. Give us some color. What's it like on the ground there?
Well, first thing I can tell you, we're in West Texas, and they did turn the music down so we could talk to you, because if you're in West Texas, you're going to listen to a little George Strait this early in the morning. So we've been doing that. There's been music, and I would tell you, of the at least 40 to 50 to 60 cars behind me, most of them are people who stayed the night here. The Baeza family, good morning. Say hello to CBSN. As old as we won't admit, and as young as 1 month old in that stroller over there, all here because you cannot see history happen 2 times in a row. You can only see it once, and that's why they bring the littlest one with them. So there's anticipation, a lot of people bouncing on their feet out here, Anne-Marie, and people are ready, 20 minutes away.
Yeah, it really is truly exciting. I imagine the area is sort of pretty remote. Have you been talking to people about, you know, what they're most nervous about, what they're most interested in watching? Have you gotten a chance to kind of chit-chat with people and find out what brings them here, obviously, aside from sort of witnessing history?
Yeah, so you've got a smattering of people here from lots of different places. There's a woman who's on her way back from the West Coast going to Florida on vacation. Their family stopped here. They're space watchers. They appreciate the history that's about to be made. But you also have a lot of people from the local town, which is just 22 miles down the road here, down Highway 54, of Van Horn. It's a town of 2,000 people. A fair amount of people in this town make a living because Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin is here. They work on the Blue Origin property. So there's in this area, there is a collective hope that the work of the last 15 to 18 years as Jeff Bezos and his team at Blue Origin have developed this property, have developed the launch site, and have developed now the technology to get us to this day today for their first ever human flight. There's a hope for nothing but success here, because all Van Horn sees and the people of Van Horn is success for what happens today, the possibility eventually of really true commercial flight like what we see today. If this could become as commonplace as a family trip to Disney and become affordable enough for people to come out here often enough to do it, the people in Van Horn, they see revenue, they see hotel nights, they see restaurants being busy, they see stores opening. That's what they see today. There's hope and there's anticipation today.
So, of course, we know on board will be the youngest person and the oldest person to ever fly into space, Wally Funk being the oldest person. I have heard her described by people who know her as a force of nature. She had said that she had a ticket originally to fly with Branson, right, with Virgin Galactic, but then Jeff Bezos gave her this opportunity. As I understand it, you know her. Is she the force of nature that people say she is?
Everything you have heard about Wally Funk over this last 2 weeks since Jeff Bezos and that now infamous Instagram video when he gave her the flight is true. She, at 82 years of age, she will run circles around me, around you, and about everybody off camera combined right now. She has that amount of energy. She is, at 82, she's the grandmother everybody would want to have because she's in the backyard playing with the kids. She's got that kind of energy and vibe. But there's an innocence about Wally as well. She and I have known each other for quite a long time. We're both aviators. I'm certainly not to the level that she is, but we have a love of flying and a love of space. And when Wally got the knock at the door, a couple of things I want to share with you. She didn't know, Jeff Bezos is standing there. She had no clue who he was. She hadn't applied for anything. She had not put her name in the hat for anything. The Branson thing, yeah, she put her name in the hat a long time ago, but she, as she would tell me when I visited with her last week, she's like 150 or so on the list based on her knowledge. So the Bezos at the door thing, complete shock, complete surprise, and this will tell you the innocence also of Wally Funk at the same time, as wonderfully astute and educated as this woman is, and she's smart as a whip. At the end of the whole Instagram thing, when she understands what has just happened, and Bezos is there with a camera crew, there's 5 people in all, he says to Wally, I'd love to take you to lunch. What is your absolute favorite place to go to lunch? And Wally says, well, I really like Pancake House. And Mr. Bezos said, you know what, let's take you to Pancake House. And they make a quick call. Unfortunately, Pancake House is closing. So Bezos says, Wally, they're closing. How about Saltgrass, which, if you don't know, it's a steakhouse. And Wally leans into Jeff, as she would relate to me last week, and she said, Jeff, Saltgrass is expensive. You know you've got 5 people with you, right? And if you can imagine being in the room with the richest guy in the world, Saltgrass is not a problem. But that's the innocence and the love and the joy that comes sparking and arcing out of Wally Funk. She is genuine.
Man, you gotta love that. And I know, there's a lot of people that are watching this stuff and watching these launches, not just this one, but of course Branson and Elon Musk and SpaceX, and they're thinking, oh, these rich guys with all this money to burn. And so I think that's what makes Wally and her story so much more endearing, that she is just a regular person with an incredible passion for space travel, that even, after the training exercises, the Mercury 13 training exercises, that whole program, after it sort of collapsed and went away and NASA wasn't interested, she kept on pursuing these sort of different phases of testing to prove that a woman, that she physically could be an astronaut, could fly into space, and so to see her finally fulfill this dream is, I think, it's sort of like a markup for the little guy, These are sort of titans of space travel now, the Bezoses and so on, but she's one for the little guy.
I would completely agree, and little known fact, when Wally got into the Mercury 13 program back in 1961, her mom, who, by the way, pushed her against the grain of society and said, I don't care what society says, you go for it, young lady, right? Her mom had to sign the document for her to get into the Mercury program, not because of any age factor, because she was a woman. Think about that. All the way back in the 60s, her mom pushed her forward to be the woman who she is today. And yes, today for her is a full circle moment. After Mercury 13, the other fact that you should know, or the viewers should know if they don't, and that is 13 of all the women who applied and went through the exact identical training as the men did back in the Mercury program, 13 basically got through. But of those 13, Wally Funk graduated #1, smartest of all the women, but she graduated ahead of all of the men as well in terms of scores and knowledge through that Mercury program. She was the #1 most, ready to go astronaut, if you're going to put it on a grading level back then. But in the 1960s, she was a woman, and that was a problem for NASA.
Not a problem now, thank goodness, and we are all cheering her on, as well as everyone else, but I got a special cheer for Wally. Hey, Doug, thank you so much. Stick around. We'll be coming back hopefully a little bit later on in the show, but really appreciate the insight that you've been able to offer us.
You bet. Thank you so much.
All right, we want to bring in Alan Ladwig in Washington now. Alan is a former NASA Deputy Administrator and the author of See You in Orbit, Our Dream of Spaceflight, and is joining us now. So, Alan, you released a book nearly 2 years ago. Good morning. It delves into the expectations and the milestones in developing spaceflight opportunities for the public. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the history, some of the key moments that have brought us to where we are right now?
Sure. Thank you for having me. The key milestones began decades ago, actually in the 1920s, when Robert Goddard first suggested and wrote about a theoretical rocket to the moon. He got hundreds of letters from people wanting to fly. In the 50s, Hayden Planetarium got 22,000 letters for people that signed up for an interplanetary tour. In the 60s, somebody suggested that National Geographic photographer be on a Gemini mission. Then we went from test pilots to scientists to mission specialists, payload specialists. In 1984, the Spaceflight Participant Program that I managed with a teacher in space and journalist in space. A big change was with the X Prize in 1994 that really spearheaded the race for space tourism. Then Bezos formed his company in 2000. The X Prize was won in 2004. Richard Branson formed his company in 2004. And now today is here we are with the dream of space travel finally happening for civilians.
You know, no matter sort of how you feel about Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Elon Musk spending their money to do this sort of space travel, and they all have kind of different long-term goals, but there's one thing that they all have in common. They all agree that space is hard, as they say, and that it shouldn't be. It should be easier. It should be safer, it should be more frequent, it should be more accessible. And that's part of what space tourism is all about. Right now, it's clearly only for the ultra-rich. That is hopefully, you know, not where they want to go, but as long as you have 4 passengers on board and you got to distribute the cost amongst 4 people, it's going to be really expensive, right? It's not like a plane where you might have a couple of hundred. So what needs to be done then to sort of move this concept along where it's more accessible to the broader public? They obviously have been focused on cheaper, recyclable materials, if you will, and they seem to have been able to at least get the recycling stuff down. But then, you know, how many steps further until it becomes like maybe, you know, I know it's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be like taking a flight to Fort Lauderdale, but, you know, maybe an expensive vacation?
Well, we're clearly in the pioneering phase right now, and that is for wealthy people. However, it won't just be wealthy people flying. There's going to be a number of researchers that are going to be able to be on some of these suborbital flights. They'll be sponsored by NASA or private companies. Their research will be conducted on the flights, which could then go on to the International Space Station or other orbiting platforms. So the notion that this is only for billionaires right now is a little inaccurate, and I do think you're going to see companies have promotions. There's already going to be a reality TV show. There's going to be movies done in space. So it will broaden. Initially, it will be for very wealthy people, and to get that cost down, they have to have sustainability, turnaround times. They have to have a mass market that will pay that for that ticket price, and eventually we'll get down through to a mass market phase. But we're still going to have to go through an exclusive phase, a mature phase, and I think it'll be several years before they get down to the holy grail that I've heard about for the last 30 years of $50,000 a flight. So
no discounts for Amazon Prime members, I presume. What's for my membership?
Yeah.
What's it good for? So you know what we are seeing though is these billionaires continuing to pursue space travel. And what I think is sort of interesting is prior to the establishment of these private businesses, it was countries that were competing. But there's sort of like a friendly competition. You know, even after sort of the shutdown of the shuttle program, American astronauts went up with Russian cosmonauts, and there was a friendly relationship of sort of sharing knowledge and sharing resources. But now you have private companies, and certainly competition is good. It's definitely pushed at least sort of these three top that we're seeing to greater heights, if you will. And there are others out there, other millionaires and billionaires that are working on space travel. But I think it sort of brings up other questions about, well, who owns some of these innovations? You know, what happens if you can land, I don't know, a rocket on an asteroid? Who owns the precious resources on those asteroids? Are there sort of brand new questions now that we have to sort of ask ourselves, now that we are leaning more into depending on private businesses when it comes to space travel and space development?
Yes, policy considerations and regulations are a little bit in the catch-up mode. And it's still unclear about, you asked about who owns an asteroid. That's a little unclear. There are certain treaties that cover that. Not everybody happens to agree with those regulations. So we'll have to see how it emerges. The good thing is, with the private sector investment on these things, and by the way, there's over 100 launch companies that are working on reducing the cost to get into space. We're going to see advances made, and then NASA can direct its funding to those things that a private sector wouldn't be interested in or couldn't make any money from. And after all, at the end of the day, we can rile and complain about billionaires, but they are the ones that are going to help push this space agenda forward.
You know, a lot of people have said, listen, you're spending billions of dollars. I think Jeff Bezos says he takes out like $1 billion a year of his Amazon stocks to put into Blue Origin. And people have said, you know, with that money, you could solve all sorts of problems that we have here on Earth. Jeff Bezos has talked about his kind of master dream. And he talked about it back in high school as part of his high school graduation speech, that his dream for space ultimately is to preserve this planet, to take industry, heavy industry off the planet, put it out into outer space and protect what we have here. And Elon Musk, it's something very similar, but he thinks that, you know, human beings should be a multi-planetary species. So I think, you know, for them, this is about kind of a humanitarian act. But what do you say to people who say, listen, we have real problems that could be solved with an awful lot of money and research. You guys have an awful lot of money, and you're choosing to look beyond this planet and find problems to solve elsewhere. What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, that's an argument I've been hearing for the last 50 years that I've been involved in space, that why spend money in space? It should be spent here on Earth. Well, the money is spent here on Earth, and it creates jobs, it advances knowledge, it creates new technologies that make our lives better. So could they invest in other things? I suppose, but this is as good as any, and I think the values that they are trying to push forward of improving life on Earth is a good thing. And also, you know, this is not just their dream. This is a dream that millions of people around the world have, to go into space, to see the Earth from a different perspective, to change our attitudes. When I got involved in space in 1970 through the Committee for the Future, the late Barbara Marx Hubbard talked about the evolutionary spiral.
Alan, I got to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. Our CBS News special report is about to start because the launch is about to get underway. Alan, thank you so much.
This is a CBS News special report. Good morning to you. I'm Gail King in Culberson County, Texas, along with Nora O'Donnell in Washington, D.C. Hey, Nora, it's really good to see you. Just minutes from now, Jeff Bezos is about to blast off into space in Blue Origin's first trip with people on board. Joining him, he's not going to be alone. Joining him on the new Shepard spacecraft are his brother Mark, who is 53. Jeff, by the way, is 56. Plus Wally Funk, we've all gotten to know her. She's 82. She trained with NASA in the 1960s, but she never got a chance to fly. And then there's 18-year-old Oliver Daemen, who will become the youngest to fly into space. So Funk at 82 will be the oldest. Oliver will be the youngest. A short time ago, Bezos and the other passengers boarded the spacecraft and are now strapped in, and they are ready to go. Nora?
Yes, good morning to you, Gail. And their flight will last about 10 minutes. We are awaiting liftoff shortly. And we should also note this date, July 20th. And for those space enthusiasts, you will know that this is a date that is historic. Today is the 52nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. That event inspired 5-year-old Jeff Bezos to go to space today. He idolized Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong as a child. Today, Jeff Bezos becomes an astronaut. Now, what we're seeing here is the animation that after nearly 3 minutes, this 6-passenger capsule and booster will separate. It will send the capsule over the Kármán line, the internationally recognized boundary of space. And as that happens, the reusable booster deploys its brakes and returns to Earth. And after its time in space, the capsule releases its parachutes and begins its roughly 6-minute journey back to solid ground. All exciting to watch. And joining me here is CBS News space consultant Bill Harward. He's been covering space launches for 35 years. Bill, is this risky?
Absolutely. Anytime you put people on top of a rocket, you're taking more risk than the average person, no question about it. That said, they have gone to enormous lengths to make this vehicle as safe as it could possibly be. They've tested it 15 times in flight. They've tested its abort system. They even tested it with one parachute out to make sure that they could land safely. Even in that case, all that went well. A lot of confidence this is going to work like they expect.
Gail?
Hey, Bill, let's talk about the crew. We've heard a lot about this crew, but I want to focus on 18-year-old Oliver Daemen for just a second, because he's going into space before he goes into college. Think about that for just a minute. Yeah. What's the significance of that?
You know, it's interesting. I guess if it shows anything, it's that they really are trying to open space to anyone who could afford the price of the ticket. In this case, his father bid in the auction they held to. It was going to go to charity to find a flyer. That auction winner had to stand down. He had a schedule conflict, and Blue Origin moved Oliver up onto this flight. He is very excited about this. He's been doing pilot training. He's clearly a space enthusiast. But at 18 years old, as someone said yesterday, you know, they were getting ready to go to the prom when they were 18, and this guy's getting ready to go to space. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
I know, Bill. I was just hoping somebody would ask me to the prom. Listen, they've had two holes so far this morning. They don't have to give an answer as to why it is on hold, but of course they're not taking anything for granted here. CBS's Mark Strausman has been covering this story from the very beginning and joins us from the launch site, as you see. Mark, this is good because we just got a message from their sister Christina. They're all on board. And this came through the loudspeaker. She says this to her brothers: "Now hurry up and get your asses back down here." That's her words. "So I can give you a huge hug. We love you."
Nothing like the love of a sister.
Nothing like the love of a sister.
Yeah.
So what's the significance of this flight? Because we've seen SpaceX go up. We've seen Richard Branson last week, and now today, Blue Origin.
Well, first of all, for the 4 folks on board, I mean, what a moment, right?
Yes.
For Jeff Bezos, his dream since he was 5.
Yes.
He gets to bring his brother as his wingman, right? I mean, you have
wingman and best friend.
His wingman and best friend, and then you have Wally Funk, who's proofs that a dream deferred is not a dream denied. She's finally getting the chance 60 years after she probably should have gone. Now she gets to go up because she got the invitation from Jeff Bezos. And, you know, we've been joking about the prom and Oliver Daemen, but, I mean, what do you do for a second act when you've been to space at 18, right? I mean, it's hard to think about. But it's, I mean, beyond, like, the personal experiences of these 4 guys, this is an important milestone for commercial space, for this nascent industry of space tourism. It's largely unregulated to encourage innovation. the only grown-up supervision is really coming from the companies themselves.
Yeah.
They have to get it right, and Blue Origin thinks they're ready.
Yeah, they seem ready. You told me yesterday there's nothing like it. You've covered these many times. And I have to say, I've never been to a rocket launch, just watched it at home. I was excited watching it in my pajamas. You're right. There's nothing like it. It'll be over our shoulders. We're 3 miles away from the site. Doug Dunbar of our Dallas-Fort Worth station, that's KTVT, is in Van Horn, Texas. That's where we are, just 6 miles from the launch site. Doug, good to see you. I'm told that you know 82-year-old Wally Funk, and you met with her last week. She has a ton of flight experience and was even part of NASA's Mercury 13 program, but she hasn't yet made it to space. Today, she is finally going to get her chance. We are all so excited for her. What did she tell you she's most excited about? Which, by the way, Doug, let me tell you this. As you know, she's 82. She told us yesterday on CBS This Morning she feels like she's 24. And Jeff Bezos told us that she's got more energy than anybody on that crew. I believe that.
Listen, both the Bezos brothers are finding out this morning after 2.5 days with Wally Funk, they're exhausted. They're ready to lay back in those seats and go take a nice, relaxing flight. Because, as she put it yesterday, she is a 24-year-old in an 82's body. She's the quintessential grandmother who can outlast the kids in the backyard. We share a friendship. We share a mutual love of aviation. I respect this woman so much for everything she's laid down, not just for space and flight and aviation and history, but doing so much of that as a woman, especially back in the 1960s when they weren't accepted as we know that. And, Gail, I can tell you the genuine feeling for Wally Funk is hope and admiration. This woman runs at 3,000 RPM when she's in idle, so there's a lot to do to keep up with her. Yeah. And this will tell you kind of everything you need to know, to be honest. That is, after the Bezos video on Instagram, when he knocked at her door, she didn't expect him. She didn't know who it was when he knocked. But when all was said and done, they're in the room together, and Bezos has his film crew with him. And then he says, Wally, I'd love to take you to lunch. Where would you like to go? What's your favorite place? And Wally says, I'd love to go to Pancake House. That's my jam. And they call, and apparently they're just about to close.
Oh, gosh.
So Bezos says to Wally, well, Wally, instead of that, can I take you to Saltgrass, which for those who may not know, it's a steakhouse. And then Wally leans in, and this is the quintessential classic Wally. She leans in and she says, Jeff, you understand that Saltgrass is expensive, and you have 5 people with you. And that tells you everything you need to know about Wally Funk. If she can lay that down to the richest guy on the planet. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Doug, I love this woman. Thank you, Doug. Nora, isn't she really our type of girl? I'll go first. Yes, she is.
Yes, she is. And such a historic woman, and so that we can all look back about how women were denied the opportunity to go to space, even though they were more than qualified. We should mark that we are now just 3 minutes and 18 seconds away from launch of the Blue Origin New Shepard. And joining with me here is former NASA Administrator and astronaut Charlie Bolden. And Charlie, you're the only one here that's actually been to space. In fact, spent almost nearly 700 hours. I mean, we've got a replica of what this will be like. But explain the feeling of when you make it into space.
It's an overused word, awesome. I always describe it to kids as 2 senses. One is the sense of feel, which is just the constant change in the way that the body is impressed with, G when you lift off to 0 gravity when you're in space. But the most impressive thing is vision, is sight, seeing the planet from that perspective. And that's what the 4 people today are going to experience that other people on this planet have never had. Significance, by the way, of New Shepard is the name. It's named for Alan Shepard. And so it's a suborbital space flight, just like Alan Shepard's first flight. New Glenn, the next spacecraft, named in honor of Senator John Glenn, the first orbital flight for an American. So we should understand the perspective, the historical significance of the names of the spacecraft.
Well, not only that, but that this is just the first step for Jeff Bezos. So some have derided this as a billionaire's supersonic joyride. But this is more than that for Jeff Bezos. His long-term goal is more than just tourism, right, Bill?
Yeah, it really is. If you think about it, he really wants to get his foot in the door in every sector of the space economy, from suborbital space tourism all the way to, as Charlie said, the New Glenn rocket that'll launch satellites and eventually people into space. He'll be competing directly head-to-head with Elon Musk and SpaceX when he goes there. And as Charlie mentioned earlier, this rocket we're seeing today is using technology they're perfecting specifically for their lunar lander. The engines will be scaled up for use on the New Glenn as well as a lunar lander down the road. So, yeah, this is just a precursor for Mr. Bezos of what he really wants to do.
Let's take a look at the live pictures now, because we are just about 1 minute from launch. And Gail, I know you have some questions too for Bill.
I do, Bill. I'm wondering what you think, how much pressure the Blue Origin team must be feeling. You know, in the town, they're very grateful. They've been working on this for 10 years. We saw somebody that said, listen, we became millionaires working on this project. How much pressure do you think they're feeling at this moment, the Blue Origin team?
I think the pressure's there, but I think they're so focused on what they're doing because there are lives involved now as well as the future of their company. So they're very, very focused. The pressure's there, but I don't think it's bothering them at all.
30 seconds till launch, Gail. I'm trying to sound like the flight commander there. T-minus 30 seconds. I mean, I guess I want to ask Charlie and Bill, what are we going to see here, you know?
Well, you're going to see ignition here in about 20 some odd seconds. So you'll see what's a really, it's a clean burning engine, and they'll lift off, as Bill said earlier. They'll be going 3 times the speed of sound pretty quickly.
Let's listen.
I actually want to see
6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1. Feet. Max Q. 30,000 feet, Mach 1.
I want to bring back in Bill Harwood, and let's describe what we're seeing, because we are about 1 minute and 40 seconds into flight. Something significant will happen in the next minute.
That's right. You can still see the flame of that BE-3 engine. It's powering the spacecraft up, Nora, getting it up to more than 3 times the speed of sound. In just a few moments, that engine's going to shut down. It'll coast briefly, and then the capsule itself will separate. So we'll stand by and see how that goes. But so far, it looks, as they say, nominal, which you and I would say normal.
And of course, the engine, or the booster, the lower part of this spacecraft, will separate, as you mentioned. That will essentially free fall back to Earth, and the capsule will go over the Kármán line. Explain the significance of the Kármán line.
That is the internationally recognized boundary of space, if you will, where aerodynamic surfaces like fins, things like that, no longer have an effect. The rocket also goes up that high before it comes back down on its own. But it takes the capsule longer. They'll descend and throw their parachutes out to make their landing. I think the engine, yeah, we're getting right upon separation, just momentarily.
New Shepard is expected to reach an altitude of more than 340,000 feet and be fully in space, officially making all of them on board astronauts. Do you think we'll be able to see the separation?
Yeah, we're watching. It's blurry, but you'll be able to see 2 objects here momentarily.
And Gail, I have to ask you, just to be able to see it in person, what was it like?
Oh my gosh, Nora. I don't even know why you get so emotional watching it. I think because you know that there are 4 human beings on board. You know how excited they are. But to watch it go up, we all just started cheering and clapping. You know, you're just looking at the plume of smoke. You know, I'm curious to see the separation because I'm told, Bill, that shortly after that, the weightlessness will begin pretty soon.
Yeah, weightlessness begins right at separation, Gail, and we're hearing the crew on board the capsule right now. I heard Bezos talk about looking out the window and what a fantastic view it was.
Let's hear. Can we hear them?
Oh, yeah. Woo-hoo! There you go. All my instincts are fine. Okay, I'm going to start back. Okay. I'm here to got it. You're just waiting for it. You want the Skittle? Oh, yeah.
And Gail, I'm looking too online. There are people saying a woman has done it, you know, and an 82-year-old Wally Funk.
I know.
Yeah.
And you know what? You just hear.
1 minute warning. 1 minute warning.
I hear a lot of cheering and woohoo! I hear a lot of that. I mean, Nora, can you think of a better group to go up with than Wally Funk, an 18-year-old Jeff Bezos and his brother, who is really today seeing a dream come true?
Absolutely. I mean, what an incredible group. Each of them marking a milestone with this trip and proving anybody could go to space, just about anybody. And I want to just, though, Bill, ask what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, you're seeing the booster and the capsule have separated. That is a view from a camera on board the rocket as it starts its way down. On the right, we're seeing the capsule at the top and the booster at the bottom. They're above the Kármán line. They've made it to what's internationally recognized as space, and it's obvious the crew's having a fantastic time.
And so, Charlie, are they in weightless gravity right now?
They're in weightlessness right now, so they'll go across the top, as Bill has described, and they'll do this parabolic flight and then start back down. It'll be a while before they start to experience gravity again, so they've got a little while now. If they had experiments on board, they would be hustling right now trying to get them done.
So they've unbuckled their seatbelts.
I think the 1 minute call that we heard a few seconds ago was a 1 minute warning to them that they're about a minute away from being allowed to unbuckle so they can
strapping back in as we speak.
So they'll let them do that. My guess is 2 or 2.5 minutes, and then say, okay, get back in your seat. And, here we go.
Listen.
Can Charlie hear me?
Yes, I can.
Charlie
Gail.
hear me?
I can hear you, Gail.
Hey, Charlie. Yeah, there are 6 seats. We were on board yesterday. I mean, I thought the capsule was pretty roomy considering what I thought it would look like inside. There are 6 seats. There are only 4 people on board, as you know, right now. Do they have to choreograph when they get up there? Because these are all full-grown people. Do they have to do some kind of... Because once you're weightless, you're just sort of free-floating.
Well, Nora, Bill, and I were discussing that a little bit earlier. That's they do choreograph, and they know that there's a handle that goes around the circumference, the inside circumference of the crew module, so that they can grasp that, so that they're not out of control. What you're seeing now is the landing coming down, which is absolutely phenomenal. So this is a powered landing where the vehicle goes back right, not very far from where it launched a few 7.5 minutes ago. So you know, this is the end for the
Charlie.
Yes.
Charlie, can you just explain that big boom we heard to let people know that's supposed to happen?
That's the vehicle going back through the sound barrier, so it's going from being supersonic to subsonic. And you heard the sonic boom. That's like shuttle coming back. You hear the boom boom because of the shape of the wing. So they get a single sonic boom.
And Bill, we're seeing now this capsule that's returning also back to Earth.
That's right, and they're beginning to feel the G's building up. The atmosphere really slows them down as they come down to the denser region of the atmosphere. We're going to see 3 drogue chutes. 3 small chutes are going to pop out of that capsule to kind of stabilize it and slow it down, followed by the 3 main parachutes. It can safely land with just 2. They would survive a landing with just 1. So it's a very well-tested system. And there go the drogue chutes as we speak.
Oh, there goes the chute.
And so when they actually hit Earth, it's slowed down. It's going to be a small bump, but the seats that we saw Gail sitting in this morning on CBS this morning, there's plenty of cushion.
Yeah, and they have rockets that actually fire to soften the landing a little bit. They fire just before touchdown, relatively gentle.
And Nora, the parachutes have now come out. That slows the capsule's descent to about 16 miles an hour. As Charlie said, when those rockets, the thrusters fire just before touchdown, it slows them down to about 1 mile an hour when they actually hit the ground.
Gail, you can see it, right?
That's spectacular. Yes, you know, Nora, this is so funny. I'm bending down, Nora, I'm bending down looking at the monitor, and Mark Strassman said, Gail, turn around. You can see it in person. God, you get so caught up watching it. Turn around. You can see it for yourself.
Oh, and
it's
Gail,
spectacular. It's spectacular.
And we can see, I know they didn't bring a lot of tourists there to watch, but people have camped up to watch it in person, and you can see kids there jumping up and down and people to watch what is really this historic flight by Jeff Bezos and the whole Blue Origin crew.
We were talking to people in the town yesterday. I'm telling you, I couldn't find one person that wasn't excited about this happening. Number one, they love all the attention that's coming to Van Horn. The people here are very nice, very welcoming, and they said, we just hope it continues. Listen, this is the first of many flights. Something tells me it is going to continue here in Van Horn, Texas. It's about to land. It's about to land. Oh, so it slows down. Mark, what is it slowing down to?
And I see a drone up there, of course, filming it.
16 miles.
And you're going to see the thrusters fire, and then it'll slow down to 1 mile per hour.
Okay.
And just sort of gently land.
So you heard what Mark just said. It's going to slow down to...
And touchdown.
That was slow?
We're told...
Touchdown.
And we're told just an incredible moment.
Oh, my God.
Welcome back to Earth.
Charlie, since you are an astronaut and been in space, Gail, Charlie just breathed a huge sigh of relief.
Oh, my God.
I can relax now.
I know, me too. Me too.
This is incredible, to be quite honest.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, 10 years ago, I think there were not very many people who thought we would see this. Bill and I were commenting earlier about both of our skepticism. This is really exciting, and I think it's a great start.
What does it mean for the future of not only space tourism, but Americans and our return to space and what we'll use space for in the future?
It means that as we're learning, we can send quote-unquote normal people. So instead of having to rely on a trained astronaut to do research in space, we can send a qualified researcher, people who understand the things that they want to do to make life better here on Earth, whether it's researching for vaccines or trying to make a material that's going to be stronger than anything else we've ever seen, or miniaturize something. So it's really important.
Let's listen to their reaction from inside.
Hey, Charlie.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead and remain in your seats. Crew member 7 is on their way. Shortly, you will hear the capsule off-gassing.
Okay, I just want to hear this for a second. But then I have a question for Charlie. Charlie, why should normal people want to go into space? You know, there's so much tisk about the billionaires who are doing this, vanity projects. Could you really explain why this is so important? You touched on it briefly with Nora. This is so much bigger than what I think people really realize what is happening here.
It really is, Gail, and normal people should want to go in space for a number of reasons. Some of them have technical reasons to want to go because we know that we can do things in the microgravity environment of space that we can't do here on Earth. So we need to be able to send people who can do the first-hand research, who can do the technological developments of things that are going to make life better here on Earth. Whether it be weather satellites or whether it's medical instrumentation or what. But we also need to have people like you and Nora who can come back and tell you're good at communicating. And we need people who can write books and write songs and talk about this incredible view of Earth from that vantage point. And there have been, about 500 people who have had the opportunity to do that. And it really does make a difference in how we view our planet.
Well, Charlie, I have to say, we have never
Jeff
met, but I
Bezos.
will never do that. But Nora might, because she really likes this kind of thing. I'm very safe right here on the ground.
That's true. That's true. Let's listen in now to Jeff Bezos and the crew. Just so excited, telling Jeff Bezos just said the best day ever. Let's listen.
Best day ever.
The audio is breaking up, and we'll get more footage later in the day from inside the capsule and from others, of course, and that will be communicated. Hopefully we'll have more of it tonight on the evening news and then tomorrow with Gail on CBS This Morning. I want to bring in Alan Ladwig. He is the Star Harbor Space Academy Executive Vice President for Communications and a former NASA executive, and also the author of See You in Orbit, Our Dream of Spaceflight. And Alan, your reaction seeing this successful space tourism flight?
Well, this is the fulfillment of a dream for millions of people. It began in the 1920s when people wrote to Robert Goddard volunteering to fly on his theoretical rocket. I used to get thousands of letters from people in the mid-1980s for the Spaceflight Participant Program when we did the Teacher in Space and Journalists in Space. Then started to open up the aperture for who could get to go. Space Shuttle opened that first, and now the private sector is taking the next important step. We've been waiting a long time, and I think now that it's happening, we'll forget about how long it took.
Thank you so much. And we are seeing now they are about to open the capsule and allow the passengers out. I mean, it's incredible that it's virtually intact and almost no damage done to the capsule after this flight. I'm also just thinking, too, Gail, as we watch them get out of the capsule, there must be not only a sense of just joy of being part of this historic mission, but relief that it all went safely.
Oh, my gosh. Listen. We all feel relief. Nobody wanted to see anything unpleasant happen here today, and it certainly has not. Doug Dunbar of our Dallas-Fort Worth affiliate, that's KTVT, is just a few miles away with someone who just watched the successful space flight for the very first time. Hey, Doug, let's talk about your girl, Wally Funk, for a second. She did it, she did it, she did it. What are they saying over there?
My heart was in my throat this whole time for Wally, Gail, and for everybody on board, but with the personal relationship.
Yeah.
The one thing I will point out to you, you heard the same thing I did, and that is when they jettisoned from the rocket, the first voice you heard inside the capsule was that of Wally, and I could hear her, and I just knew in my heart the minute they entered the fun zone, Funk was out of the straps and calling everybody out, both Bezos brothers and Oliver, and said, let's dance and let's have fun.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see who got out of the seat first, but something tells me you could be right. You have somebody with you, a little person who watched this too?
Well, I got to tell you, there were hoots and hollers. There are hundreds of people along Highway 54. There's a roadblock here. This is as close as we can get. This is Theodore Hervey. And out of all the hoots and hollers, yours was the loudest, kid. So first, high five for an awesome lunch today. Yeah, how many devices did you record this with?
I recorded it with my iPad and my iPhone.
And just tell us in a nutshell, why so excited? Why does this get you so thrilled?
Because it can, it's basically an opportunity for our next generation.
Do you see yourself maybe one day doing what you just saw?
Yes, sir. Maybe, yes.
Buddy, let's hope and pray, man. High five, Theodore. Way to go. Gail, a lot of excitement out here and among the youngest, and one can argue this is the generation we're trying to inspire.
I know, Doug, this little person watched the way that Jeff Bezos watched when he was a little child. You're looking at the capsule. It's landed. You can see Jeff there in the window. They're about to come out. We really don't want to be talking when they're coming out because I want to hear anything that they have to say. But it looks like I hear Wally still going, thank you, thank you. There's
thank
Jeff.
You, Dad. Thank you.
There's Jeff. Did he say thank you, Dad?
No, that was a little kid who was talking.
Oh, a little kid who was talking. Oh, okay. Okay, I saw Jeff just give a thumbs up there in the window. They went up, they came back, they're safe and sound, and they look very happy. Look at that smile on Jeff.
Look great.
Yeah. What do you have to say, Mark Strassman? You predicted this. You said, yeah, they're ready, and they were certainly ready. Blue Origin.
It sure looks like it went picture perfect, the way that Blue Origin wanted it to, the way they were confident that it would go, the way that Jeff Bezos had dreamed it would go since he was 5 years old, watching watching Apollo 11 land on the moon. I mean, you heard him say this is the greatest day ever. I mean, it really is the realization of a dream.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all business considerations aside, this is a personal moment for this guy. And let's face it, he leads a large life. And for him to say, this is the best day ever, it's the best day ever.
Best day ever.
Yeah.
Charlie, I don't know if you can still hear us, but what takes so long to open the damn door?
Oh, it's not long at all. I was sitting here commenting to myself that, you know, technologically, the fact that they're using clean propellants, the fact that there is no, you know, coming out of shuttle, it was an hour. Just trying to make sure it was safe around the vehicle. And so this is incredible. But to see the little kid, that's been the highlight for me today.
That is what happiness and jubilation looks like, guys. There's Jeff Bezos, his brother Mark. They each have 4 children. Wally Funk is there, and Oliver Daemen, who's 18, being greeted by family and friends.
They, too, just as excited to see them back on solid ground safely as their family and close friends all there with them. And, you know, Gail, we should note the feather that's the symbol of Blue Origin is a symbol of the perfection of flight. And that's what today was for this company that has been working on this for decades in order to achieve this historic moment. A day for celebration for this entire
What a good feeling, Nora.
Entire crew. And I just want to talk to Bill and Charlie here because I'm struck, well, to recognize this moment and what they have achieved and what it could mean for future people who want to experience the same moment. It'll cost you $200,000 at least at some point. They're saying these types of flights. Very, very expensive to do this. But it's also a continuum. And Jeff Bezos told me that we are essentially slowly destroying the Earth, and that heavy machinery, other things will need to move to other planets in order to save Earth from climate change and other things, that's the future in 50, 100 years from now that he imagines in his mind.
He's talking about production off the planet. We use the term zero mass launches, where you use a very small spacecraft to take the feedstock, whether it's powder or ribbons, and you use 3D printing to print what's going to be the components for a rocket that's going to go to Mars. So you don't do it on Earth and need a vehicle like we launched today, and we take the feedstock. You do it on orbit or you do it on the surface of the moon. That's the kind of stuff that Jeff is progressing to. And when you look at everybody standing around that vehicle right now, we would not have been doing that, you know, in the space shuttle era because there's all kinds of noxious fumes and stuff that came out of our vehicles. He's into, you know, reusable, energy efficient, environmentally safe. So that's the wave of the future.
And there's the champagne.
Yeah. Bill and Charlie, if you guys can hear me, you know, the Blue Origin motto is step by step ferociously. I think this is pretty ferocious what they're doing right now, don't you?
It's ferocious, and you hit the nail on the head when you said step by step. That's been Jeff Bezos' philosophy. I remember the first time I met him many years ago when he came into my office to explain why Blue Origin was not going to get involved in the bidding for NASA funding for, you know, for commercial space. And he said, I want to go at my own pace. I don't want to have artificial pressures on me and my team. We're going to fly when we're ready because the first people to fly are going to be my son and me, he said at that time, which just, it made me tear up, to be quite honest, because he's got it. He understands it. And step by step, by step. So next thing is New Glenn, several years down the road, but this is a big day. It's a big day for the country. Everybody says it's a big day for Blue Origin. That's true. It's a huge day for America. Only in America could you see this. And we need to understand that. We need to get a grip.
And I can tell, Gail, Charlie here is a little emotional saying that, only in America. And explain what you mean by that, the innovation that we champion here.
It's because of who we are, because we believe in an idea. The president talks about this all the time. This nation is founded on an idea. We're not there yet. It's a long trek to get to where all men are created equal. All those other. To see the young black boy there, excited. That answered the question for people who say, "Why the heck are we doing this?" If it didn't answer it for you, you don't understand. You don't get it.
Oh, I love that you said that, because there have been many critics out there that are saying, oh, this is a billionaire's joyride. But it's much more than that. It's much more than that, not only for this country, but the future of science and space and inspiring young people.
Inspiring kids to not want to sit on the corner and shoot people is important. Nora, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gail.
Nora and Charlie. I wanted to pick up on what Nora said about the billionaire's joyride, because people say this, not to be Debbie Downer, but they say there are so many problems down here on Earth that we should be addressing, that they should be addressing. We're spending all of this money in space to go to space, and to what end? I think you've articulated it very well, but I wish you could put a button on it about why this truly matters.
Yeah, not to make light of this, and people will criticize what I'm about to say. The young man sitting there, excited as he was, that's one less black kid on a corner somewhere getting ready to use a weapon. It is really, really, really important. For us to inspire young people, we have to inform them. There were no black kids standing around when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin went to the moon. We weren't a part of that. We are today. Women weren't a part of that. They are today. So this is a huge day for the nation. And, we need. The unfortunate thing is that Congress didn't take a time out and turn on the TVs and watch this. They need to understand that the things they're discussing right now are critically important.
And it's not a new criticism. I mean, certainly with the John F. Kennedy, and Bill, you can address that. Historically, people wondered why we were spending billions to go to space.
The one comment, and I thought Charlie was going to say this, not one dime has ever been spent in space. Every dollar that's ever been spent has been spent right here in the United States, paying talented aerospace engineers and scientists creating and all jobs. That. I'll be the skeptic at the table. I agree with everything Charlie said about this, how significant it is. I would just add the word potentially to it. It's not clear to me that this will work as a business model long term. How many people are going to be willing to pay that much money for a 10-minute flight? Even if NASA puts astronauts on board, which they're talking about doing, government researchers, things like that, it's not clear to me that this market can support two companies, Virgin Galactic with Richard Branson and Blue Origin with Jeff Bezos. I certainly hope it can, but that's an unknown right now, and we need to keep that in mind.
But also the world's richest man, who's worth $200 billion, may not need to turn a profit for his company.
Well, that's very true.
Which is a privately held company, and he's able to write off his profits on his losses that I'm just saying, to speak as a capitalist and understand the U.S. tax code system, he can write off his losses. Gail, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Charlie said for just a second. That it means one less black kid on the corner. I don't want anybody to think or believe that all black kids are just hanging out on a corner. I think it's inspiration for everybody. But I get the point that you're making, that it gives other people other options that they could see. I just really wanted to clean that up, because I'm sitting here going, no, Charlie, no. No, Charlie, no. I know what you were trying to say. But I don't want that left hanging on the air as I'm sitting here listening to you.
No, I understand fully.
I know.
You're absolutely
I'm not
right.
criticizing, just making an observation. But I do think that it's exciting. Listen, I'm sitting here as a black woman. I'm not going to tell you that I'm a space geek, because I'm certainly not. But I was sitting here with Mark getting very emotional, and I don't even know where it's coming from, just because I see how big this is and how important this is and how dangerous it is, and that they pulled it off. I'm just so relieved for all of us.
Yeah, you don't quite understand the power of this moment until you're here in person.
Yes,
you can watch it on
right.
TV
You're
and
right.
sure it's exciting, which is why when you were watching the monitor, I was like, Gail, turn around, right? Like, it's so much more spectacular this direction,
You're so right.
Yeah, and
I know,
it really
Nora,
is.
that was kind of a moment, because that's the whole reason why we're here.
Well, I think, I totally agree with you. And I think, I remember in talking to Jeff Bezos, because we talked to him previously on the anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. Remember that at that time, there were hundreds of millions of people that watched that. And so this moment, too, I can see even on Twitter, people saying, I just watched this with my son, with my daughter, with my kids. That kind of moment that we haven't seen, that hopeful moment that many people have been missing, perhaps, in the past couple of years, that America can do something incredibly inspirational. And I want to bring back in Alan Ladwig, who's with us, who has written a book about space tourism and has followed this, of course, the inspirational moment that this creates.
Exactly. This has inspired people for generations. We saw that throughout the space shuttle missions, 135 missions. And now we're going to see the inspiration that this causes again. People want to go for the adventure, the spiritual fulfillment, the fame, seek a higher purpose. One of my favorite quotes was from a Russian cosmonaut who said, "Those who fly in space feel differently and become sick with a global philosophy and terrible case of cosmic views." Let's hope that these future flights continue in that evolutionary spiral.
Well said, Alan. Thank you. And Bill, we're watching, if you're seeing, we're watching a highlight reel, which Blue Origin has already turned around, of the best moments, essentially, from this morning, this quick. There's the launch, of course, of New Shepard for the first ever suborbital flight with a crew. The joy felt by Sarah Knight there, who, of course, was in charge of communications, and then the landing of the rocket portion, which really, that in itself, right, is a remarkable feat. And the capsule, again, with the 3 parachutes all deployed correctly, as though you've noted, though, they tested it. They could land with just one and still be safe. There were many redundancies, as they say, that's the word, or many abilities to land this safely, even if something went wrong. They had plotted all out with 15 different flights without a crew in order to make sure this was totally safe. And there, the celebration. Wow, they turned this video quickly.
And Nora, just for the record, they hit 66.5 miles. So they were 3 miles above the Kármán line, as we talked about. So very definitely a space flight, for the record.
And was that higher than Richard Branson's team?
Absolutely. The Virgin Galactic plane doesn't exceed 60 miles at best. They're usually in the mid-50s.
But intended to be. It's a rocket.
Yeah, it's a rocket in space,
plane.
either way.
Yeah. Well, because there has been, not to get too technical, some back and forth between Richard Branson's team and Jeff Bezos' team about whether Richard Branson's team actually achieved a suborbital flight.
They achieved what NASA calls a suborbital flight into space, as the FAA does and the U.S. Air Force. So I think it's a trivial argument, and I don't think anybody on board either spacecraft would be able to tell the difference.
I more than second that.
Gotcha.
Let's forget about it. There is no argument.
I hear you. All right, Gail.
I wanted to talk a little bit with Charlie and Bill there about the training, because I was very fascinated about this. You know, it's so different. Nora, you said earlier it proves that just about anybody can go, because really all you're doing is riding. And they said you have to be in reasonably good health. The requirements were this: your height between 5 feet and 6'4", your weight between 110 and 223, be able to dress yourself in a one-piece zip flight suit, be able to fasten and unfasten your harness in 15 seconds, be able to hold it by not going to the bathroom in, say, 90 minutes, be able to understand commands in English. But, Nora, this is where I thought of you. And this is where I had to drop out of the race, where it says, be able to climb the New Shepard launch tower. Nora, it's the equivalent of 7 flights of stairs in less than 90 seconds.
Okay, you can do that, Gail.
I know, Nora, guys.
You can do that, Gail.
No, I can't. No, I can't.
Yes, you can.
Guys,
I saw
at the
your
table,
Instagram
Nora's a
feed.
runner.
You've been training.
No, I was hiking at Malibu Ranch where I was a caboose. No, I couldn't, but I thought Nora could do that. But I wanted to talk to you guys about the training. how different the training is compared to what you were saying about anybody who's reasonably healthy could go. So that really does open the door to a lot of people that might not have considered it, which I think is a good thing.
The advantage that commercial spaceflight gives us is that you don't, in NASA, we figure out what can go wrong and what is the extreme of what can go wrong, and we train to that. That's not necessary in this case. You figure out what is the minimum amount that someone needs to be trained to fly safely, and that's what they do. And Virgin decided that it was about a week. These guys decided it was a couple of days, and we've seen from this first flight that it seems to be adequate. And that's the difference between, that's what's going to get the cost down, to be quite honest, is doing what is absolutely necessary to stay safe, but not going to the extreme of wanting to be able to deal with all possibilities or all things that can go wrong. That's not the place for a crew like this. A crew that's got to fly a vehicle and keep it in space for a week, that's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We should also note, Gail, too, a little bit about Wally Funk, 82 years old. 3 years before Jeff Bezos was born, she was part of the Women in Space program with 12 other women who had trained as part of the Mercury 13. They were denied that opportunity, and she applied to NASA twice in 1962 for the Gemini missions, and again in 1966 when she was told that she would not be going to space. She said about the 60 years trying to get into space, she said, I was brought up that when things don't work out, you go to your alternative. And thus she became a successful pilot, training thousands and thousands of people to fly. And as we've witnessed, look at her there hugging Jeff Bezos, that her enthusiasm, her attitude are absolutely infectious, and that has brought her to this historic moment today. And that's why she's a personal hero for many people.
Not a lot of people on the planet with 20,000
I know. Listen, she's.
What's the first thing you said?
No, everybody says, Nora, and guys at the table, everybody says that she is the real deal. I love the fact that she never, ever gave up. In fact, Mark told us that she had signed up to go on a Virgin flight, the next one, and then this opportunity presented itself. Doug Dunbar of our Dallas-Fort Worth affiliate, that's KTVT, knows Wally. And Doug, last time you were here, you said that when Jeff Bezos knocked on the door, did she not know who he was, or she didn't know he was coming? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, as she tells the story, she said, I didn't know who it was at the door, and as things begin unfolding, then she realizes, oh my gosh, here comes the trip to space. And you know what, just a nugget to dovetail off what Nora was talking about. With that Mercury 13 program, the other thing Wally is very quick to point out was, yes, I was in the Mercury 13. Yes, I outscored all the ladies, but I also outscored all of the men in the program. So Wally Funk wants to make sure that you know that as well.
That.
For that 6 decades, she has been waiting now for this opportunity today.
Hey, Doug, do you happen to know if she carried something special with her up today when she went to space? Did she have a little memento?
Well, my understanding, Gail, is that if it's parsed among all 4 of them, they each maybe had a little pouch or something of that nature where they could take something that was of importance to them, maybe it's a family member's picture, things like that, up into space today. And the short answer for me is yes. I visited with her a couple of times last week before she took off, and she's well aware of my passion for the cancer fight. Lost my mom to cancer a few years ago. I've raised a lot of money to help the effort. But what's most important to me is this key ring of photographs, and it has all my honored heroes on there. There's probably 20 to 25 photographs on there right now, some still with us and some who have departed, but Wally wanted to honor each of them as she got into the weightlessness of space today in the Edge, and reach out to them and send their love not only up there but also to the warriors down here who have fought hard and won the battle. So it's a bit of a personal note, but at the same time there are other items that she took up, and my guess would be, and I don't want to assume, but my guess would be that each of those on board today had some things that were probably fairly close to them in family and in their hearts and in spirit that they took with them today on this historic journey.
There's no doubt about that. Thank you so much, Doug. Listen, Nora, they're already handing out, they're just handing out these special water bottles. It says natural spring water. You see the logo. It says best used by 6/7/23. It's cold. I've already tasted it. It already tastes good. So I will be bringing this back. This is what I'm bringing from space.
Gail,
bottle
can
of
you
water.
get me one? Gail, will you save me one, please? I want one.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Already
thank you.
done.
Okay, good. Thank you,
Already
sweetie.
done.
Thank you. And of
All
course,
right.
it's got that feather on it, which I love, which is the Blue Origin
Yes.
feather, the symbol of the
I do
perfection
too.
of flight. And Charlie Bolden, it's been such a pleasure talking to you as the only one here who's actually been to space. You've been NASA administrator, a Marine for how many years?
34.
Yeah, I mean, just
Still, but active
such
duty.
an incredible career that you have had. And I know you're emotional today watching this because it means so many great things.
Big deal.
Very big deal.
Big deal for the country.
What's your hope?
My hope is that we'll continue this gradual trek, our pursuit for the perfect union. That's most important to me right now. So that doesn't have anything to do with space flight and all that kind of stuff, but it's really important. We've got to live up to this.
And does it matter that it's now private companies that are doing this and not the U.S. government?
It does matter, to be quite honest, and what it does is it means that the U.S. government can devote more assets, more resources to doing the things that only the government can do. So exploration is really risky, and that's where the government should lead. We don't need to be providing the train or the plane or the rocket ship to get people and things to space, because the private sector has demonstrated very, very well. They can get things, they can get people. NASA, you go off and you do the exploration lead, and we'll bring up the rear. And so that's what, once again, we demonstrated that today, and people have been saying that for quite some time.
And Charlie, if Jeff Bezos called you
I'll
and
go.
said, you will
I'll
go.
go.
Okay, there we go.
My wife is probably going, what the hell is he talking about?
There you heard it, Gail. Charlie wants to go. Yeah.
Nora, that is so funny. I was just saying, I was going to ask Charlie that exact same question. If they came to you and said, we want you to go, you would go. I want to know what your kids and your family would say about that, Charlie.
I
Because
just
I'd be
said,
thinking,
Gail,
I
now
don't
I'm in
know,
trouble.
Dad, not now.
I'm in trouble with my wife and my kids, but I'd go.
Yes. Why would you go? Tell me, why would you go?
Once you've been to space, you want to go back. You don't want to stay there forever. That's where I disagree with people who talk about colonizing and all this kind of stuff. It is an experience that once you've had it, you want to do it regularly, to be quite honest. And I want to be able to be an example to people. I promised John Glenn before he passed that once I got to be 77, so I've got 2 more years, that I would try to provide one more data point of a near octogenarian. So it would be John Glenn, Wally Funk, and Charlie Bolden in the data points.
You know what? As Gail and I both know, once you put that thought out into the universe, it can come true. That's the first step in getting what you want. Charlie, I know you have to go, but what a pleasure to have you. Former NASA administrator, former astronaut, former Marine for 3 decades. Yeah, such a pleasure. And maybe now a future returnee to space. Gail, we heard it here first.
Yes. Very nice to meet you, Charlie. Very nice.
Good to meet you, Gail. Take care.
All right, and let's bring in Mr. Ladwick, who joins us again. And Alan, this morning, I think so many people, you've seen kind of the expression of both joy and even as Charlie just did, even a little bit of tears because of what this moment means for those who may want to engage in space tourism, but also what it may mean on a commercial side.
Yes, and there was talk earlier about is going to be a mass market for this. It's been predicted that by 2027, we could have a $1.7 billion space tourism industry. So that's a great step in the right direction. It remains to be seen how many people will be able to sign up. But Virgin already has 600, and I have no doubt that after today, people will be banging on the doors of Blue Origin to go. So it's important that the commercial sector is taking this on. It was never NASA's goal or business to fly tourists. So I'm so happy to see that the dreams of millions of people is finally being realized.
So, Alan, I didn't realize that. How many people have signed up for Virgin Galactic?
Over 600.
At $200,000 a pop.
200 to 250,000 because they raised the price. There is some rumors that they may raise it even higher to perhaps 300,000, and we still don't know what the price will be for Blue Origin.
Yeah. Well, I'm still thinking about the person that paid $28 million to get on that Blue Origin flight and then suddenly had a scheduling conflict. Like, who pays $28 million and then has a scheduling conflict?
He had
right,
a dental
Gail?
appointment.
Nora, that is so true. Nora, I'm very glad you did scheduling conflict in finger quotes. You know why? Because I'm thinking if you can afford to pay $28 million, you can afford to make sure you get the exact schedule that you want. So I'm always very curious about who he or she is. You know, that name, that person wishes to remain anonymous at this time. But the prices do sound so beyond the moon for most people. $28 million, that was for charity, we should say. That was for charity. But the $200,000 to $250,000, Alan, when do you think that it'll be? What do you think it will take to get the prices down that it's more affordable? And what's the definition of affordable for a space ride? What's that definition?
That's okay
now. Alan, we were talking about the price. You know, and it's $28 million. That was for charity, we should say. The person that paid the $28 million was for charity. But you and Nora were just talking about the $200,000 to $250,000 price tag. Most people cannot afford that. So when do you think it will be affordable, and why does it cost so much? And what, Alan, is your definition of affordable to go into space?
Well, the long goal has always been $50,000. I've heard that for the past 20, 30 years. It's going to take a while to get there. Richard Branson said he wants to get it down to $40,000. That'll depend on how often they fly, if the market can hold, if they can sustain their operations, and if they can do it safely. So I'd say we're probably 10 years away from that kind of a price. I hope I'm proven wrong and that there's some growth that we don't know about yet in the efficiency of this. But we are now clearly in the pioneering phase, and it's going to be a while before we can go to the mass market phase.
All right.
Why does it cost so much, Alan? Why does it cost so much?
There's millions of dollars that were involved in the development of these engines, of the spacecraft, of the people involved in doing it. You know, it's still cheaper on a per-pound basis than we had with the space shuttle. There were predictions in the 70s that the shuttle would fly for $50 a pound. It never got anywhere near that. It was more like $10,000 a pound. So there's a lot of economic factors that go into this, and the only thing that'll bring it down is efficiency in operations and in turnaround ability and a large number of flights to spread the cost.
Thank you so much. I want to bring in Bill Harwood, and you've covered these space flights for 30 years, but this is different. How monumental is it?
It's a big step, but it's a first step. You know, you have to sustain this to see if it's going to develop into the business and what Charlie was talking about earlier, this long-range plan to commercialize space. I'm hopeful they can do that. They clearly have demonstrated they have the technology to do it. These are fantastic hardware. You know, I wouldn't have imagined this 10 years ago. But one thing, you know, we have to point out is, and Alan mentioned this, they've got to be able to do it safely, Nora. You know, as a commercial spacecraft carrying passengers, you know, you can't afford a mishap. Like we've seen in the past with rockets from time to time. It's a high-energy enterprise. So if they can do it safely, and if they can develop the marketplace, then I think it's a huge potential market, but it's a first step.
Bill Harwood, thank you. And on this, the 52nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, which Jeff Bezos watched as a child and idolized Buzz Aldrin and, of course, Neil Armstrong, and today became an astronaut himself. The history just made in Texas. We all witnessed it together as Blue Origin's first rocket launch carrying people was a flawless mission that could be the start of a new era in space travel. Want to say thanks to Gail King in Van Horn, who will interview Jeff Bezos later today. Looking forward to that, Gail. Really excited to hear that interview.
Me too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and thanks to our correspondents, contributors, and guests. And for those of you on the West Coast, there's more coverage coming up on CBS This Morning, plus on our streaming network, CBSN, and your local news. Thanks for watching.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.
Hey, here we are, the streaming network CBSN. You just saw it, a successful flight and landing for the new Shepard rocket. Just amazing. All 4 crew members are back. They're safe on the ground after a short trip to the edge of space. Now, 2 of the passengers made history as the oldest and youngest people ever to go into space. So let's talk a little bit more about what we just saw. I want to bring in Eric Stallmer. He is the Executive Vice President for Government Affairs and Public Policy at Voyager Space Holdings. So people understand, I mean, the company that you work for, this company has put their money on space travel. And it's not just sort of the whims of 3 billionaires that are interested in going to the edge of space. There are a lot of other companies, startups, people investing in what we will do in the future outside of this country. So first off, I want to get from you kind of your emotional sort of gut reaction watching this successful launch and landing.
Well, that's exactly it. It was incredibly emotional, very symbolic, being on July 20th, kind of a sacrosanct date in the space industry, a day that inspired millions of people around the world, inspired Jeff Bezos. So to see this happen 52 years later and the generation that it inspires today, it is really breathtaking, and it's a very exciting time to be in this industry.
So, we get that this is a very expensive venture, and we talk a lot about sort of commercial travel. Clearly, this is out of the reach for most people. I think I heard a line somewhere that said the best way to become a space millionaire is to start off as a space billionaire, because it costs an awful lot of money to go into space. But the goal is to bring the price down to something that's somewhat attainable. It may still be for the very wealthy, but not for the uber wealthy. What is it going to take to get there? You know about all the other ventures that are happening out there they're not getting the kind of attention that the Bezoses and the Elon Musks and the Richard Bransons are getting. In the foreseeable future, can you see commercial space travel being something more attainable?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, today was the first step. Last week's flight with Virgin Galactic was another first step that's going to eventually bring the cost down to make it accessible to space for everyone. And that's the democratization of space. And as we fly more, the cadence increases, the cost will come down, the research will increase, the benefits of space travel and space flight will increase. So it's only going to be more beneficial to people on the ground and bringing the cost down.
So let me ask you this question. Why do we need it? We've talked sort of a bit throughout the morning about, why is all this money being spent on this sort of venture? And I think that what people may not see is that, yes, this is the first step, but it's not the goal. Why invest this much time, energy, financial capital, and human capital into pursuing space travel like this?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's inspirational. It's inspirational. Yeah. It brings more innovation and creativity to people as we can tell the story about why we go to space, the things we see, the experiences people have, the technology that we're advancing. I think the bigger question is why not go to space and why we haven't done this sooner. Because the values of space exploration, space travel, and what is happening with human-tended payloads and doing these real-time experiments in space with weightlessness. There's so many benefits to what is happening in the space world right now. We are overdue for this type of excitement and this breakthrough.
Should we concerned about the fact that this pursuit has now shifted away from something that only countries did, where there was, a tremendous amount of cooperation when Americans landed on the moon and they planted the flag on the moon. They weren't sort of claiming ownership. This was all something that we were going to share as humans. Should we be concerned that now the shift is to, private industry, the commercial pursuit, that there are going to be issues perhaps with ownership of technology, ownership of, whatever you find out there in space that may have value, and the spirit of space travel that pulled us together is going to be lost?
I don't think there should be concerns. I think this should be embraced. I think this is, opening up and making the world a smaller place. That the boundaries, what countries are doing, and the cooperation and the collaboration that is existing in the commercial space community is really exemplary of what is happening in our industry, and even from a geopolitical perspective. Yes, will there be issues on property rights and how resources, lunar resources are used, and will questions arise? Of course there will. But I think if we get to that point where we have those type of questions, I think that's a really good problem to have. The fact that we're exploring new boundaries and going in, pushing further and further into the solar system, I think that's nothing but a good thing. So the concerns that are out there are far outweighed by the opportunities that space exploration brings to humanity.
Well, Eric Stallmer, I got to let you go, but something tells me that we could continue this conversation for sort of another hour. Really appreciate the time that you spent with us.
It was great talking with you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so we want to bring you to Doug Dunbar, who's been standing by in Texas watching the launch. And also, well, I should let you know that Doug is an anchor with our CBS station in Fort Worth, Texas. Also a friend of Wally Funk, who we saw Doug burst out of the capsule. And I have to admit, because we've been making such a big deal out of her age, I was really watching to see, how she would emerge from the capsule. And man, she just sprang up, ran down those steps. She looks great.
Yeah, she was. And she, honestly, I have a picture from a week ago. I was sitting on her living room floor, and I said, describe to me what this is going to be like and when you come out. And she, on the living room floor, she did that. And I think that's one of the first things she did when she came out of the capsule. So true to form, Wally is excited. And, when we were watching the launch, there's a lot of people here, probably a few hundred on the side of the road on Highway 54 at the roadblock. And we all watched it from probably about 5 to 6 miles away. And walking you through the launch, we saw the rocket fire up. No doubt you could see the flames from this far away. And as it goes skyward, we heard nothing. And then about 2.5 minutes in, big boom, which was from actually earlier. It took that long for the sound to travel all the way down here from when they fired up, and then skyward. And I was really struck by when CBS coverage was dipping in and listening to the audio that was inside, because there was no live picture, but they had the live audio. And the first voice I heard was Wally Funk screaming in there. And in my head, I know that my friend is the first one when they got into what I call the fun zone. She was unbuckling, getting rid of the straps, and looking at Jeff and Mark and Oliver saying, get your butts up and let's have some fun.
I love it. Listen, we heard during the special report, and I didn't get a chance to ask you about this, that Wally was carrying sort of a special memento. Everyone got a chance, you explained, got a chance to carry sort of a small satchel or whatever with something important to them. And one of the things that she was carrying is actually also very important to you. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate you asking. It's very personal, but I'm a huge cancer fighting advocate, and I've got a lot of what I call honored heroes who I have met, and they've come into my life over the years. Raised over $350,000, all aimed at cancer research. I do a ton of work with Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Ironically, it would be my mother, who I lost in 2018, long after I started the fight in the name of other friends, and the irony that I would lose my mom. Anyway, fast forward, Wally and I were visiting last week, and she said, do you have anything that you'd like me to take to space with you, or for you? And the short answer was, I have a key ring that I keep with me. It's either in my home or on my person or in my car. I keep it with me a lot. And it's got pictures of all my honored heroes through the years. And there's 20 to 25 pictures on that thing. Most of them are still with us. These are heroes who have fought the beast and they've won, but there are some who we've lost, and that includes my mom. But Wally said, without question, I'm taking this to space to you, and when I'm weightless and when I'm reaching out up in the 3 to 4 minutes of weightlessness, I'm going to be reaching out to those we've lost, which includes my mom, of course, and I'm going to be looking down and saying how proud I am of those who are still with us, who have fought the beast and won, recognizing those other faces on those photographs. So, you know, for me personally, yeah, horribly, terribly emotional, and may admit to a few man tears out here when I saw her, you know, making the apex with the capsule, because I know what was going on inside there, but I know the thrill that was in her heart at the same time, and well deserved for Wally Funk.
Listen, Doug, you know, that really touched you, but as you know, as you call it, people who fought the beast and won or lost, millions of us have been affected by cancer, and so I'm sure that has touched many more people as well. Hey, listen, Doug, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Cheers. It's been a great morning, and history was made. How better can the day get?
Indeed. Indeed. All right, go take a load off. Relax now. You've done enough. We're going to pivot on over to Washington now, where CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood is standing by for us. You watched the launch all morning long there. So listen, I'll start with kind of the personal for you, because as we know, every time we need someone to talk about space, you're our guy. This is your jam, as they say. So what did it feel like to watch this thing really go off without a hitch?
You know what? I'll give you two answers to that. One is it looked exactly like the 15 previous test flights of this vehicle. It did go off without a hitch. It looked exactly the same. But of course, what made it different was people were on board for the very first time, including Jeff Bezos, possibly the richest man in the world. And this is his own rocket ship. And so there's some extra drama with that. Now, I always get nervous for any rocket launch with people on board. It is a high-risk endeavor, and you can't make light of that. No matter how many times you see it, you kind of take that for granted, but you're still riding a rocket. And so I'm a little bit nervous whenever I see that happen, but I've got to say, they really have developed what I think is as safe a vehicle of this class as I can imagine coming up with. I would certainly not hesitate to ride it myself. I think it's got the safety and redundancy built in to ensure a safe flight. And of course, Virgin Galactic, the competitor, also has a vehicle that is demonstrably safe. They've flown it multiple times with people on board now. So it's very exciting. I mean, long answer to your question, but it's very exciting to see technology that has evolved to carry, I won't say normal citizens into space, because you're not normal if you can, I shouldn't put it that way, but if you can afford that kind of a ticket, you're not an everyday sort of person. But the goal is to get to the point where it is more affordable. This is a first step in that direction, and in that sense, it is historic, and it certainly was fun to watch.
Yeah, it definitely was. I want to bring in Alan Ladwig again, also joining you in Washington. Alan, listen, you are a former NASA Deputy Administrator, the author of the book See You in Orbit, Our Dream of Space Flight. So Bill said he would definitely take a flight if offered the possibility. Alan, would you?
I would. In my book, I mentioned at the end, if I would go, I said, well, I'm waiting. I'm a little claustrophobic. I'm waiting for a spaceship with a big deck and doors that go whoosh. But after today, I'd fly on Blue Origin. And may I also mention...
I gotta tell you,
May I also mention,
Go ahead.
Speaking of cancer research, the next private space mission coming up in September, Inspiration 4, that Jared Isaacman is funding and will include my colleague, Dr. Cy Proctor. That flight is also raising money for cancer research at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. So I think when people criticize all the billionaires, it's also important to see that a lot of the money being connected with these flights is also going to worthy causes.
I think that's a really good reminder, Alan. There's been a lot of attention on kind of the big three space barons, as they're kind of being called, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Richard Branson. But there are a lot of other companies, and not a lot of other wealthy people. Paul Allen from Microsoft also sort of pursuing this. But there are a lot of other companies that are pursuing various types of space exploration. And one of the things that these kind of more superstar billionaires do is bring a lot of attention and money to the type of research that, may very well change the way we live. We already know that this space race has reduced the cost of going into space, and either of you guys will probably be able to clarify me if I'm wrong, but I think it's brought down the cost of a kilo of cargo by like 40%. So if that continues, who knows, maybe one day, the cost will come down low enough for the rest of us. But Bill, for these billionaires, it isn't really just a vanity project. Space tourism is really just sort of one aspect of what they are pursuing. Bill, can you maybe give us a little more, shed a little more light on what else is going on behind this push for space travel?
He's not only trying to develop this suborbital space tourism market, he's also built a gigantic factory just outside the Kennedy Space Center where they're going to build orbit-class rockets named New Glenn that'll eventually put satellites into space and eventually people. And the rocket we saw launched today, the technology that went into that engine, that is all being scaled up for use. A version of that engine will be used on the New Glenn rocket and even on a moon lander that Blue Origin is on a team designing. So he really does, Bezos really does want to expand into all sectors of that space economy. Richard Branson is doing the same thing. He has the suborbital space flight with his rocket plane that we all saw a few days back. He also has another company launching small satellites to space from a 747 jet, which is pretty cool to watch. Again, trying to get the cost down for small payloads. So all of these guys, and not to mention Elon Musk, I mean, he's already hugely successful in this field, launching everything from cargoes to crews to the space station, and is building a big new rocket that will eventually fly to the moon and beyond. This commercial space explosion, I'll call it, because that's kind of what it is changing the way both cargo and people get to space. And the long-range goal, again, as Alan said, is to get that cost down per pound to orbit. And that's a huge milestone, and they're certainly making progress in that arena.
Yeah. Bill and Alan, it's been great having you here for this coverage. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so on to some other news. Yeah, down here on Earth, the serious stuff, the stock market. It's looking to regain some of yesterday's losses after suffering one of the worst days since 2020. It went in the opposite direction, not towards the orbit, down. This is happening as fears of another coronavirus wave threaten the U.S. economic recovery. So we're going to have more on the Biden administration's plan to reassure investors. Keep it right here. You are streaming CBSN, CBS News, always on.